Imagine making one decision that could either secure the future of the world's most popular sport or become the moment football fans look back on and ask, what were they thinking? That is exactly where FIFA finds itself today. Because while millions of fans are celebrating goals, dramatic comebacks, and unforgettable World Cup moments, another story is unfolding quietly behind the scenes. A story that has almost nothing to do with what happens on the pitch. A story about money, power, politics, and one gamble so enormous that its consequences could shape football for decades. The strange thing is that this gamble didn't begin with a controversial referee decision or a last-minute rule change. It began with a number, 48. At first glance, it sounds harmless. Just 16 more teams, more football, more excitement, more countries chasing a dream. Who could possibly be against that? But here's where things become far more complicated. Because the moment FIFA announced that the World Cup would expand from 32 teams to 48, the football world split into two completely different camps. One side called it the greatest decision in modern football, the other called it the beginning of the end. And what's fascinating is that both sides have convincing arguments. So today, we're following the story all the way to its source. We'll hear from the people who support the expansion, the people who oppose it, the coaches, the players, the economists, the broadcasters, the fans, and perhaps most importantly, we'll follow the money. Because as always, the biggest decisions in football rarely happen for just one reason. Before we begin, if you enjoy football documentaries that go beyond the headlines and uncover the hidden stories shaping the beautiful game, make sure you subscribe to Goal Theory and turn on notifications. We dive into the stories most fans never hear, and trust me, this one is bigger than it first appears. Let's go back. For nearly 3 decades, the World Cup followed a formula that most football fans grew up with. 32 teams, 8 groups, 1 month, 64 matches, simple, elegant. Every game mattered. Every qualification spot felt precious. If your country reached the World Cup, you knew it had earned its place among the best. That exclusivity became part of the tournament's identity. Missing the World Cup was painful. Qualifying was celebrated like winning a trophy. Just ask Italy, 4-time world champions. They failed to qualify for consecutive World Cups. The shockwaves reached every corner of football. If a nation with that history could miss out, it proved just how difficult qualification had become. Then there was Egypt, one of Africa's biggest football nations. Generations of players came and went without ever experiencing football's greatest stage. Across Asia, Africa, North America, Oceania, and parts of Europe, fans watched the same pattern repeat every 4 years. Strong teams stayed home, not because they lacked talent, but because qualification had become brutally competitive. FIFA looked at that reality and saw a problem, but many fans looked at it and saw something entirely different. They saw prestige. Because scarcity creates value. The harder something is to achieve, the more meaningful it becomes. Winning the Champions League means something because almost nobody does it. Playing in the World Cup means something because almost nobody gets there. Or at least, that used to be true. Then came the proposal that would change football forever. 48 teams, 104 matches, 16 extra nations, almost 2 weeks longer. A completely redesigned tournament. When FIFA officially approved the expansion, President Gianni Infantino described it as a victory for world football. His argument sounded convincing. Football belongs to the world, not just Europe, not just South America. If more countries participate, more children dream, more federations receive investment, more governments invest in stadiums, more academies are built, more coaches are developed, more fans become emotionally connected to the tournament. From that perspective, expansion isn't simply about football, it's about opportunity. And honestly, that argument deserves respect. Because if you were born in Morocco, Japan, Canada, Saudi Arabia, Uzbekistan, or any country that historically fought for one of only a handful of qualification spots, you might see the World Cup very differently. For decades, many confederations argued that the allocation of World Cup places favored traditional football powers. Europe regularly sent more than a dozen teams. South America almost always qualified half its continent. Meanwhile, Africa, home to over 50 national associations, often received only a handful of guaranteed places. The imbalance frustrated millions. FIFA claimed expansion would finally correct that imbalance. More African teams, more Asian teams, more CONCACAF teams, more representation, more diversity, more football cultures, and on paper, that sounds wonderful. Imagine a child growing up in Kenya believing the World Cup is genuinely within reach. Imagine football exploding in India because qualification suddenly feels realistic. Imagine smaller football nations receiving billions in infrastructure investment simply because governments now believe qualification is possible. Those are real possibilities, not fantasies. History suggests major tournaments genuinely accelerate football development. Hosting changes countries. Qualifying changes countries. Investment follows hope, and hope has enormous value. Which brings us to the first surprising twist in this story. Many of the loudest supporters of expansion aren't sitting inside FIFA headquarters. They're sitting inside developing football nations. For them, this isn't about television ratings. It's about finally receiving a seat at football's biggest table. But every story has another side, and this is where the debate begins. Because while FIFA spoke about opportunity, critics started asking an uncomfortable question. If expansion is primarily about developing football, why does every financial projection predict enormous commercial growth? Suddenly, journalists began examining television contracts, broadcast rights, sponsorship agreements, advertising inventory, ticket revenue, hospitality packages, streaming platforms, and the numbers were staggering. Adding 40 extra matches doesn't simply create more football, it creates more products. Every additional game becomes another television event, another advertising opportunity, another sponsorship activation, another premium ticket package, another day fans spend inside stadiums, another opportunity for global brands to reach billions of viewers. The economics were impossible to ignore. Sports economists estimated that expanding the tournament could generate billions of dollars in additional revenue over a single World Cup cycle, not millions, billions. Suddenly, critics began asking whether football development was the primary objective, or simply the most persuasive public argument. That question still divides football today, because motivations matter. If expansion truly exists to grow football globally, many fans support it. If expansion primarily exists because bigger tournaments create bigger profits, the conversation becomes much more uncomfortable, especially when player welfare enters the discussion. Think about the modern football calendar. Elite players already compete in domestic leagues, domestic cups, continental competitions, international friendlies, Nations League fixtures, World Cup qualifiers, continental championships, Club World Cups, commercial tours, travel across multiple continents. Recovery periods continue shrinking. Sports scientists have repeatedly warned about fatigue, muscle injuries, burnout, mental exhaustion. Some players now exceed 60 competitive matches every season. For goalkeepers, defenders, midfielders, and forwards alike, every extra match adds another layer of physical stress. Expanding the World Cup doesn't happen in isolation. It stretches an already crowded calendar even further. And that's exactly why several players' unions expressed concern almost immediately after FIFA's announcement. Not because they oppose global football, because they fear the human cost. Managers quietly share those concerns too. Many national team coaches privately welcome greater representation. But they also understand something most fans never see. Tournament football is brutal. Recovery sessions begin almost immediately after the final whistle. Medical teams work through the night. Players carry knocks they never publicly discuss. By the quarterfinals, very few squads remain completely healthy. Adding more matches increases the challenge. The irony is almost impossible to ignore. FIFA says expansion creates more opportunity. Medical experts worry it also creates more exhaustion, and neither side is entirely wrong. Then another question appeared. Would expanding the World Cup actually improve the quality of football or dilute it? Supporters immediately pointed toward recent history. Morocco reaching the semifinals, Japan defeating major European nations, Saudi Arabia shocking Argentina. Croatia reaching consecutive deep tournament runs despite a relatively small population. Football's traditional hierarchy has already started changing. Perhaps expansion simply gives more talented nations the opportunity they've always deserved. Critics remain unconvinced. They argue that adding weaker teams inevitably creates more one-sided matches, more predictable results, more group stage mismatches, more games with little competitive tension. Nobody wants to watch 8 or 9 goal scorelines if they become common. The World Cup built its reputation on elite competition. Protecting that reputation matters. But football has a habit of surprising people. Before Morocco's incredible run, many dismissed African football. Before Croatia reached a World Cup final, few predicted it. Before Japan consistently challenged Europe's elite, many underestimated Asian football. Every generation produces a nation that forces the football world to rethink its assumptions. Maybe expansion simply increases the chances of discovering the next one. Or maybe it increases the number of forgettable matches. Nobody truly knows. And that's precisely why this decision feels less like careful planning and more like a gamble. Not because expansion is guaranteed to fail, not because expansion is guaranteed to succeed, but because nobody, not FIFA, not broadcasters, not economists, not coaches, can say with certainty what football will look like 10 years from now. That uncertainty is exactly what makes this one of the boldest decisions in the history of the sport. And as the tournament unfolds, new evidence keeps emerging. Some of it strengthens FIFA's argument, some of it strengthens the critics. The real answer may not become clear until several World Cups have passed. And by then, the sport itself could look completely different. Because the biggest gamble FIFA has ever taken isn't really about adding 16 teams, it's about changing the identity of the World Cup itself. And once football's biggest tournament changes its identity, there may be no going back. So, where does all of this leave us? The truth is, nobody can honestly say whether FIFA's biggest gamble will become its greatest success or its biggest mistake. Maybe 20 years from now, we'll look back and say, expanding to 48 teams helped football reach countries that had been waiting generations for their chance. Maybe we'll witness new underdog stories, new football cultures, and a truly global tournament unlike anything we've seen before. Or maybe the critics are right. Maybe more matches will slowly dilute what made the World Cup so special. Maybe player fatigue will become impossible to ignore. Maybe commercial interests will continue pushing football further away from the game fans fell in love with. And that's what makes this such a fascinating moment in football history. For the first time in decades, FIFA isn't just changing the format of the World Cup, it's testing the future of football itself. The biggest gamble was never simply adding 16 more teams. The real gamble is believing that you can make the world's greatest tournament bigger without changing what made it great in the first place. Only time will tell if that belief was visionary or dangerously optimistic. But one thing is certain. The next few World Cups won't just determine who lifts the trophy. They'll determine what the World Cup becomes. Now I want to hear your opinion. Do you think expanding to 48 teams is the right decision for football? Or has FIFA taken a risk that could change the tournament forever? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video and want more stories that go beyond the headlines and uncover the hidden side of football, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Goal Theory, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.